Hey, friend, welcome to She Said podcast. I'm your host, Laura Cox Kaplan. So this week we are continuing our summer beach read series, and I am absolutely thrilled to welcome one of my favorite authors. Her books are always in my beach bag, Deborah Goodrich Royce. Her newest book is called Best Boy. It's out now, and it is absolutely fantastic. She has been on my list of folks to talk to for some time, and I am really thrilled that we made it happen. One of the things that I love so much about Deborah's work is that in every one of her books, there is an interesting story about female identity and evolution, both personal and professional, potentially. And I've always found myself gravitating toward her books for that reason. So we dig into a lot of this and where the inspiration comes from. Deborah shares aspects of her story, both the funny and the painful, and how those find their way into the characters of her books. I think you're going to love this conversation, both from the standpoint of sort of learning about how Deborah creates these characters, but also how she's navigated her own career and life pivots. There is a lot to love in this episode. So be sure to send me some feedback once you've had a chance to listen. But for now, here is episode 365 with my new friend, Deborah Goodrich Royce. Enjoy. Deborah, welcome to She Said.
Thank you, Laura. I am so happy to be here. I have to say, my husband and I were sitting in a theater looking on my phone at your themes and everything you laid out. And he said, "Who is this person? She's really smart." I said, "Yes, she is. I can't wait to talk to her."
Well, that is really nice of you. I am a big fan of yours, as I mentioned before we started, and I've read all of your books. And was so excited to read the latest, which of course is called Best Boy. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. But one of the things that I think I didn't really clue in on immediately until we started thinking about this beach read series is this notion of identity. And you describe your genre essentially as identity thrillers, which I absolutely loved. And it's why I've been so attracted to your books, because in every single book, there's a twisty identity, sort of hidden self, something that reveals itself. I don't want to give too much away, but it's a theme that is in every one of your books. Where did this come from? Was this something that you planned, or did it just kind of evolve naturally?
I didn't plan it, but I think as women, it's really something we deal with from such a young age. I have been spending time this weekend with two little granddaughters. One is 7 and one is a year and a half. So forgetting the year and a half one who, when you're that age, you really know who you are. And when you're 7, you really know who you are. But I see the cracks appear. Who am I vis-a-vis these other girls who maybe behave differently, live differently, say weird things to me at school? So I think it really starts then. I think it's a very female journey. I
Mhm.
can't speak about the male journey with any authority. I was very blown away. Oh God, what was it, 30 years ago, by the book Reviving Ophelia
Uh-huh.
by Mary Pfeiffer, who talks about the journey as a female. And we go from being kind of the Nancy Drew, the Harriet the spy, the observer of what's going on around us, to, at the moment of puberty, we become the observed. I once heard an Indian spiritual teacher say, "Be the seer and not the seen."
Mm.
So at puberty, we as females become very conscious of being seen. Are my hips okay? Is my face okay? Is my skin okay? Am I okay? And we're always looking outside
Mhm.
for that. And I think as then we go through our adult life, it becomes this journey back to who we are. So I'm being very long-winded. So yeah, I'm fascinated by this idea of the secrets we keep and how we reveal parts of ourselves, what we don't reveal, what we do reveal. I think we all have secrets. Most of them are pretty benign. I can talk about experiences I've had with people who have different kinds of secrets, which is always a bit of a mind blow
Right.
when you meet people who are hiding something
Uh-huh.
serious. So yeah, I mean, I've spun that out a little too far, but
I love all of that. There's so many different dimensions and so many directions that we can go because so many different elements of, the secrets and how they reveal themselves, how that affects the person as she grows, and those are some of the storylines that reveal themselves in your books, which I love. I would love, Deborah, to because, we're talking about these amazing books that you've written, but I also really want to dig into you as the author and how your personal experiences sort of find their way into your books. So let's talk a little bit about your origin story, which is so fascinating. You started out as an actress and sort of maybe walk us through a bit of your journey.
yeah, I'm a girl from suburban Detroit. I grew up in a very bland, middle of the road suburb. I was fascinated with foreign languages. So that was my first longing for the broader world. I studied French and I went to a public school. By the time I was 15, I started going to a college, a community college at night to study Italian. So I had this idea that I wanted the wider world.
Hmm.
Where I grew up, nobody I knew was traveling to Europe or certainly not Asia. We were very Canada adjacent, so we went to Canada a lot. So I went to college. I was a French and Italian major. I was a dance minor. And I did my junior year in France. The summer before my senior year, a movie came to town. I was outside of Cleveland at that point, by the time I was in college. A big studio picture with Frank Langella and Tom Hulce came to town. It was a musical. I was cast as a background dancer, and the choreographer kept saying to me, and this again is sort of tickles what we're talking about. He kept saying, "You should come to New York and audition for me." Well, I'm from the Midwest, so I'm very literal. I thought he was literally inviting me to come to New York and audition for him. So screen comes around. I finish college. I'm back in Detroit, not knowing what I'm doing. I realize he's holding auditions at the Minskoff Theater in New York. Uh, I call him. He doesn't sound thrilled to hear from me. But I essentially moved to New York the next day, auditioned for him, was not cast. And it was an interesting moment. It got me to New York, but it was also a little disillusioning that this person didn't actually, he didn't really mean what he was saying.
He was just sort of throwing it out there.
Yeah, just throwing it out there to a cute girl. Really, it was not, it wasn't me too, but it was a guy coming on to a young girl, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You end up in New York and you ultimately get cast on a soap. Was that right after?
No. So I, I'm going to tell this in a way that kind of has a little bit of pixie dust over it. So when I auditioned for him, he was holding auditions at the Minskoff Theater in New York City. The stage door of the Minskoff Theater is 1515 Broadway. So that was my first entry into New York, wasn't cast. So I spent about a year pursuing a dance career. Took class every day, auditioned for everything, for everyone. I auditioned for Agnes de Mille herself. She was still alive.
Wow.
And after about a year, I thought, I'm not quite good enough as a dancer. And before I applied to graduate school, I had Georgetown in mind. I thought I will just try acting. I'll give that a shot. And I had a completely different experience with acting. I had a lot of luck. I did a ton of commercials. And within about a year after that, so really 2 years from arriving in New York, I got this big role on All My Children, which I played the sister of Erica Kane. Susan Lucci
Right.
uh, was the actress, the star of the show. And I think in many ways I was hired as a foil for her character because the show revolved around her, as it should have. She
Mhm.
was the key to all the ratings. And I did all my children for a year, and then I was written out. My character was sent to jail for bad deeds, and then
As happens on a soap.
Paramount Pictures flew me pretty shortly thereafter to Los Angeles to screen test for a pilot with Christopher Lloyd, which I got, and I ended up moving to LA, and I had a nice 10-year run as an actress. And before I forget this thought, and before we go on to anything else, so 1515 Broadway. We'll go through everything in the middle, but 40 years after the day I auditioned there,
Uh-huh.
40 in, 41. In 2021, my publisher called me. Ruby Falls was about to come out. It was COVID. Broadway was shut down. He said, would you like for us to organize a triple electronic billboard in Times Square? I said, how much is that going to cost? Because of course, the writer pays for everything. He said $3,500. I said, how much does that normally cost? He said about $200,000. So I didn't have to think long.
Right.
I thought, yeah, I really would like a triple electronic billboard in Times Square. My girlfriends and I drive into New York. We're standing there like a bunch of farmers looking around Times Square. You know where I'm going. There it is above the door of 1515 Broadway. 3 massive uh, image of me, image of the book cover, image of the reviews. And I thought, if an angel had split the heavens 41 years ago and said to me, listen, sweetheart, this dance career is not going to work out, but don't worry. Just work hard. Just put one foot in front of the other. Just keep going forward. You'll be back here in a way you cannot imagine. Would I have believed it? Probably not, but it is a message I would like to convey to younger people that you might have no idea where it's all going, but just keep going.
Yeah. Were you writing at the time? I mean, was there any indication that I mean, I know that it's, that's such a dream come true and something that's sort of even hard to think about, but was pursuing a literary career somewhere in the back of your mind?
It's a great question. I always wrote in school, I wrote in college, I wrote, nonfiction as a
Mhm.
student. I noodled around with fiction while I was an actress and a young mom. And then when I left acting, my first husband and I moved to Paris when our children were really little. He was from there. I ended up, as I was mourning my acting career,
Mm.
there are these funny pivots in my life. I was then hired as a reader for a French film studio.
Hmm.
So, I mean, this is a normal entry level job in film development. You read the manuscript, you synopsize it for the studio heads, and you write a page of comments. And so I'm living in Paris, I'm going to the parks, my kids are little, I'm reading great books and screenplays. And I thought, I could do this. And then when I came back to New York, my first husband came back to work for Julia Roberts, and I was hired by Harvey Weinstein as the story editor at
Wow.
Miramax.
Interesting.
So again, going back to identity, I didn't know about his extracurricular activities. The whole time I was working there, I was there for several years. I wasn't in his office. I wasn't booking his appointments. I liked Harvey. I liked working for him. He gave me a great opportunity. Miramax was extraordinarily creative at the time. And I think of those years as my writing school,
Yeah.
being in that editorial chair. But I do contemplate the concept of him, who he was, and a truly compartmentalized human being.
Mhm. Mhm. So fascinating. You mentioned grieving your acting career. You didn't mention sort of why you left or why and how you closed the door on that. And I'm so fascinated by the topic of, as we evolve and we decide to pursue new pursuits, oftentimes it's a choice that we've made ourselves. Sometimes it's a choice that's thrust upon us, but oftentimes it's a choice we make. And yet you can still grieve the thing that you decided you don't want to do anymore. And so I'm curious which it was for you.
Yes, and all of the above. So I got to a point with acting. Once I was in LA, I was doing a lot of feature films, a lot of nighttime TV. And there came a moment where I screen tested for a movie called About Last Night. They screen tested 5 actresses: Demi Moore, who got the part, Mariel Hemingway, Diane Lane, Phoebe Cates, and me.
Wow.
And my agent said, "You're moving into a different category. You're not going to do television anymore. You're not going to do small roles in feature films anymore. You are on the precipice of the next stage of your acting career." And I got pregnant.
Mm,
So I think so many of our lives hinge on moments like that. I was happy. I was married. I had a beautiful daughter. But the time I took off being pregnant then turned into a much extended period of time because there was a writer's strike.
hmm
So it was like a year and a half. And by the time I went back, it was emotionally not the same for me. First of all, in the industry, I'd lost that place that I was almost about to inhabit. I
mm.
had lost that entry ramp, and I had lost my enchantment with it. This was the time there were no cell phones, they weren't emailing you a screenplay. So I would get a call at 6 o'clock in the evening. I had 2 little children. I was still acting, but at 6 o'clock in the evening to drive an hour to pick up a script, which is not fun when you have little children. That's kind of the witching hour.
Right.
So the bloom was really off that rose. It just, my heart wasn't in it. So when
Mhm.
we had the opportunity to move, I was very happy, but there was that mourning process of letting go of what could have been.
Did you, sort of thinking about that particular sort of coming to terms with that, recognizing that you are happy in this part of your life, but that you do have to say goodbye to something else. Is there any advice that you would offer somebody who maybe finds herself in that particular season? Because you really are talking about a season in life. And when we're having kids, like that's a particular season that we go through for most of us. Um, Maybe advice for kind of thinking about those seasons and coming to terms with sometimes a pivot that you hadn't expected or might have planned a little differently, potentially?
Well, because I've certainly had other pivots that were much more agonizing, and we can talk about that too. When, you know, a decade later, my first husband left the marriage, and that was really shattering. I
Mm.
just interviewed Belle Burton about her book,
Oh,
Strangers, and we talked a
amazing
lot
book.
about that. Um, I am going to answer your question, but going to the second pivot, the end of the marriage and the end of the family and the end of what you've created, because creating a marriage and a family is like writing a book. It's you are creating something together. And when one person says, "I don't want this anymore. I don't believe in it anymore. I'm not participating," it's it's not only painful, it's dismaying.
Right.
Very hard to wrap your head around that. So, but we all get those kinds of pivots,
Mm.
whether it's, having to make choices with career once we have children. I guess I would go back to that 1515 Broadway moment. If you look at that span of 41 years and everything that happened in the middle, I mean, what what would I have said to my younger self to have her hold on to some knowledge at that moment when that thing didn't work out at that particular doorway. Um, and then all those years later, such a moment of fulfillment at that very same doorway. How do we find a way to hold on to some sort of faith that we're on a path, that there is meaning, that we are going somewhere, and that we really should try very much to enjoy where we are right now? I think that's the hardest thing for most of us because we're so forward looking.
Right.
The lesson of the 1515 Broadway could be, let's just barrel to the 41 years later, but that's not the point.
Right.
The point is really to enjoy each moment,
Yeah.
particularly the moment with little children. And I
Yeah.
see this now having grandchildren. Um, I have such an awareness of how fleeting it is.
That area in between, which I oftentimes refer to as the messy middle, where it feels like you're slogging away, when you can find a way to really embrace and enjoy the process of getting to wherever it is you're going, even if where you're going may be a complete surprise to you. And it may only seem linear, maybe looking back. I find
Yep.
that so fascinating. Um, you talk about in um, a couple of your books inherited identity and generational trauma. It's a painful topic, but I liked how you wove it into the book. And I was fascinated to hear that there's actually an element in your own story
Yeah.
that you draw from
Oh,
Reef
I
Road.
my mother's friend was murdered, her best friend, when my mother and this other girl were 12 years old. And it was a really brutal murder, and it was an unsolved crime, and it had an enormous effect on my mother, and I would say me, and I would say in many ways my daughters. I do think we
Hmm.
carry it forward, and when COVID shut the world down in 2020, that's when I started really investigating the real murder, which then led to writing fiction. I didn't want to write true crime. I didn't want to get in the business of that family. And I wasn't really trying to solve a crime.
Mm.
I know who I think did it. That wasn't my point. My point was to look at how we are changed by the things that happen before us or the things that happen next to us.
Right.
And I think the more awareness we have of that as a phenomenon, the better off we'll be. Because I think we're all carrying a lot of loads
Yeah.
in that way.
Yeah. No, I found that so incredibly compelling when I read about your story and your mother's story and how that really shaped her, how it shaped you in some respects. And I hadn't really thought about that notion of generational trauma, certainly, and thinking about it carrying on to your own daughters.
So my husband is a statistical thinker. He's a Wall Street guy. He would have said, he did say, my mom, who's passed away now, oh, well, it's very neurotic of her to lock a door or set an alarm. And I said, well, she's not cowering inside a house. She locks a door and sets an alarm, and she's done with it. She's at peace.
Mm.
She's comfortable. She's sort of secured the perimeter. Years later, our house was robbed. It was pretty horribly robbed. And I think it rattled him because he
Hmm.
would have said statistically that was very improbable. But probable or not, those are things in one family, these weird things happening at home. So I am now allowed to lock a door and set an alarm because our house was wide open when it was robbed.
Oh my gosh.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh. And that, of course, that storyline finds its way into Best
It
Boy.
does. It does. Of course it does.
And I'm assuming you were drawing from your own personal experience.
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I changed details, but yeah. Um, it's a funny thing when something like that happens. You know, we live, most of us, in a world where it can seem like we're kind of managing our circumstances, managing our surroundings. And when something like that comes into your life just out of the blue, which of course that's how things happen for everybody, whether it's a death in the family, an accident, a robbery, whatever, it's destabilizing
Right.
above everything else.
Yeah. Yeah. It's destabilizing and it causes you to question your identity and who you are.
Right.
And I feel that as you write these characters, especially around marriage. And I would imagine that you draw from your own personal experience. You mentioned that that was very shattering. I can only imagine. But you feel that in the way that you draw these characters and the way that you tell their stories.
Well, so interviewing Bill Burden, uh, her book Strangers, which is now going to be made into a movie with Gwyneth Paltrow, who's
Oh,
coming
wow.
out of retirement. When I had mentioned to several people that I was interviewing her, there were a few women who said very disparaging things. Well, I think she's just a whiner. I think she should get over it. I don't know why she's writing about it. And in every one of those cases, I would say to that woman, "Are you divorced? Have you ever gone through divorce?" "No." I said, "So you don't actually know how that can happen?" "Well, no, but it's very easy to sit in judgment because, people think, well, you should have known, but you don't always know." And the other weird thing with divorce, other people will recharacterize your entire marriage. If you lose a spouse to death, which is obviously awful, I'm not disputing that, people allow that you could have had a happy marriage. If you lose a spouse to divorce, people want you to get a tattoo or something. It's like that's how they're going to fix it. They're going to take you out drinking and piercing, or it's a very it. So with divorce, you're almost robbed of the ability to grieve what may have and probably was a beautiful marriage for whatever length of time it was.
Right.
And then this idea,
At
going
some
back to
point. Yeah.
identity, that people change on a dime, what is it that snaps in another person? My first husband, when we went through therapy, he said, and he doesn't remember saying this because we have become friendly since. He said, "I've got to get this right. I felt like I was in a room filled with bees, and I would have done anything, including jumping through the glass to get out of it."
Wow.
But then when he was not crazy anymore, because that midlife crisis is a kind of craziness, he said, "Oh, I don't think I ever said that." I said, "Yes, you did. You did."
I mean, handling that though, I mean, not to dredge up things that are must have been so incredibly painful, but I mean, how did you deal with that?
It was
That's a
very
horrible
hard.
thing to
It,
say.
it was very hard. That was the thing that brought me to my knees. And how I handled it was I was a mother. I had two daughters.
Yeah.
Um, and that's how I handled it.
Yeah. You had
That's
to.
how most people
Mm.
handle. We generally pull ourselves together for the people we love. And,
Yeah. I mean, it's horrible, and I'm sorry that you went through that. I do think as a fan of yours and a reader of your books, I get the benefit of all of that perspective, not having gone through that, but I'm sorry that you did. That's
well,
really
thank you.
awful, truly awful. Let's talk about how your career ended up pivoting into writing and when you got that first book published and what the process was for getting there.
So I was at Miramax in the 90s as an editor. I was all along writing a little bit on my own. What I wasn't able to do, I was able to work as a mother of young children. I wasn't able to do that kind of creative, cone of silence, deep dive, I'm talking to nobody type of work.
Mhm.
I was able to do the kind of multitasking type of work. So I left Miramax just to put the timing together and ended up getting divorced in the early 2000s. When I remarried, I'm married to a wonderful person still, a wonderful man. I moved to Connecticut, and my husband proposed that we restore a cinema. He said, "You were in the movie business. You know all about this." And I said, "I don't really know anything about running a movie theater." But we restored this 1939 cinema in Stamford, Connecticut, called the Avon, and the actor Gene Wilder got involved. And we became friends, and we would email back and forth. And he said to me at one point, "Are you a writer? I think you're a writer." I was in a couple writing groups. I had written something. I'd gotten a grant for it. I'd put it in a drawer. So he offered to read something. I sent him something, and he became this cheerleader. When I would see him, he would eventually say, "Are you writing? I hope you're writing. You should be writing." And for me, the magic pivot, again, to use the word of the day, was in my mid-50s. My youngest child was grown and flown. She was the one I'd been more worried about in the teenage years. And I thought, if I'm going to do this, I I had something I wanted to work on. It was Finding Mrs. Ford, and I didn't have that title. But what I wanted to explore was female friendship.
Mm.
I'd met a girl when I was in college who became the basis of the Annie Nelson character, that kind of incandescent, larger than life train wreck of a beauty that everybody's kind of dithering over. And the girl I knew, we met working at a summer job. She did, as I wrote in the book, encourage me we were 18 years old, to go get jobs as cocktail waitresses at this questionable disco. My mother said to me, she said, "That girl's bad news." And she was bad news. But I was so dazzled by her. There was more to her than that. And in real life, the girl I really knew, Lori Hill was her name. She had mental health problems, something I couldn't understand at the time, I didn't recognize. But as the years went on, I went back to college. She never did. I came to New York and had a career. Her life started spiraling. And we stayed in touch for another decade, really, until I moved to Paris with my young family. And it was a moment where we lost touch.
Mm.
And I had two little children. Her life was becoming very troubled. So I thought it's best to leave that. Until all those years later, I couldn't stop thinking about her, and I wrote that book. And I think in many ways, um, it's a very loving homage to who she was. She did contact me through social media. She had a pseudonym. She talked to all these writers. She became friends with me and my whole writing group of friends on Instagram. She used the name Ruth Westmore. I mean, it's such a stern kind of old lady name. It took me a while to realize who she was.
Wow.
I mean, there's another book in this, and then she
Totally.
died. She died.
Oh.
Yeah. But
Mm.
so going back to why I started writing, I wanted to write about her. I wanted to write about that dynamic of friendship. Again, identity. How is it? I knew my mother was right. I knew I had no business going to this weird, creepy disco, getting a job, but I did it. So what is that?
So, looking back on your career and the interesting things that you've done, is there a through line with all of it? Now you're involved in preservation. You're also opening your doors to fellow authors and giving them a platform. Maybe talk a little bit about how you see is there a thread that connects your path?
Yeah, I feel like it's all about stories. I think
Mm,
everything I do, everything we all do, is all about what story are we telling? What story are we living? What are we creating around us? We're in an act of constant creation. We are constantly really making our realities. And maybe I'm not speaking about people in war-torn regions. I don't want to be so presumptuous as to, loop in every situation, but I think for most of us, we're writing our own stories. What are we going to do with things? So preservation, that really started with us when we did the Avon Theater.
mm,
What do you want to live surrounded by? What do you want this world to look like? What do you have control over? What can you control? And years before I had the financial ability to restore anything, I chose to live in a small town outside of New York. I chose to shop at the little local toy store. And people would say, well, why don't you just go to Toys R Us? You can get more Barbies for your daughters. And I would think, they don't need more Barbies. They need to go to this cute little local store and get one.
yeah.
Um, but those are choices. We're
Mm.
telling stories at all times. So that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's beautiful. Maybe advice that you would give your younger self as she was just getting started, or advice for maybe somebody listening who thinks she might have a book in her or who's navigating a particular pivot, struggling with identity, especially in sort of midlife. Any thoughts or advice that you would offer?
So I would say, in terms of life, find something. My husband once said this to me: find a little something every day that you can look forward to. Whether it is a really good cup of coffee, whether it is a little walk outside, it might not be much, but find something every day that you can look forward to. That little flag in the sand every single day, I think, is extraordinarily important to getting us through this life, whatever it is. And in terms of career advice, I would go back to that 1515 Broadway. You might not see where this is all going. I never stopped working. I worked at one thing first, the dance career, then the acting career, then the editorial career, then, you know, the motherhood, all these things I was working all along. So just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Study what you're interested in. Read the books you like. Watch the movies you like. See the part of the world that you want to. Doesn't necessarily cost anything
Mm,
to expand your understanding of what you want and what you can create for yourself. Because in the end, this is the thing you're writing. It's this life.
right. Oh, that's beautiful. Beautifully well said. Your latest book is called Best Boy. We'll put a link in the show notes where folks can grab a copy. I think it's fantastic. I have a hard time picking my favorite of your books, and I won't force you to do that. Anything that you want to share that you're working on currently?
I'm writing a ghost story. I'm
Oh,
having so much fun. My mom died 2 years ago, and I was very close with her, and I got this hit of inspiration, and I've been working on it on and off for 2 years. I was interrupted. I got a contract to co-write something with someone else, which I can't really talk about yet, but I'm back to working on the ghost story, and I'm having a ball. It's making me laugh every day.
amazing. Can't wait to read it. Deborah, thank you so much for your time. Really
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Laura. You are amazing. Delightful. Thank you.
Thanks.